Good morning, everyone. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety tested its next batch of vehicles against a taller, heavier, faster barrier like the trucks and SUVs that are out on the road today. As Elise Preston reports, some of the most popular cars in the country did not fare so well.
Midsized cars struggled against the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety's tougher side crash test. The Institute put 7 popular passenger cars to the test, which is now a 4,200-pound barrier striking the driver's side at 37 miles per hour.
Part of our redesign of the barrier was to emulate the pickup trucks and the large SUVs that are out there in the real world that are the striking vehicles in many of these crashes.
In this test group, only the Subaru Outback earned a good rating. 3 cars received poor ratings. Structure was particularly compromised on 2 of those models, and in all 3, there was a likelihood of injury.
Either one or both of the female dummies' heads slipped below the side curtain airbag and struck the window sill.
IIHS says one reason for the group's disappointing performance is the lower ride height. But President David Harkey is confident automakers will respond.
All of these vehicles had good ratings in our original side test. I have no doubt that they will get to a point that they will get them back to having a good rating in our updated side test.
The Institute plans to test smaller passenger cars and smaller pickup trucks to see how well they protect passengers. Elise Preston, CBS News.
Starting next year, a good rating will be needed to meet the Institute's criteria for top safety pick. All right, if you need rental insurance, time is running out to apply for the program known as RAMP that the state started during the pandemic, and that is rental assistance. Governor Tate Reeves is directing the Mississippi Home Corporation to stop accepting applications on August 15th, and he wants all remaining money to be sent back to the federal government. Courtney Ann Jackson explains why he's pulling the program.
Governor Tate Reeves is concerned the emergency rental assistance program is incentivizing people not to work.
This is a program that when initially started made sense because many of these individuals lost employment through no fault of their own. In today's world, we don't have a lot of people out looking for jobs. We have a lot of jobs out looking for people.
Sarah Taylor's one of the folks telling us she's had problems getting through to anyone.
Thank you for calling the Rental Assistance for Mississippians program.
I'm waiting 3 to 4 months to get what I requested for, so that pretty much kind of put me back in the same spot that I began with.
You're able to get up to 15 months of assistance, and Taylor only got 3 initially, but she's left waiting to hear if they'll accept her recertification.
Which was in May. Here it is in August. Nothing, haven't heard anything.
I asked the governor about the delays.
The application process, it does take some time because we do have a focus on ensuring that we minimize or mitigate fraud. As this program has dragged on over the last several months, we suspect that a higher and higher percentage of those applications are potentially fraudulent, and so that of course slows down the approval process for those individuals who have legitimate applications.
He says it's yet another reason he's choosing to end the program. More than 36,000 Mississippians have gotten approved out of the over 86,000 who applied. Courtney Ann Jackson, WCBI News.
A California nonprofit organization is going on some unusual fishing expeditions. Its mission is to remove as much plastic junk as possible from the ever-growing Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Max Darrow explains how from California.
The sailing ship Kauai recently returned from its latest fishing trip to the North Pacific Gyre, also known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Its catch, tons of abandoned fishing equipment, single-use plastics, and household goods.
It's a very sad and eerie feeling to be in the middle of the ocean and to see our own garbage floating out there.
Located halfway between Hawaii and California, the floating mess contains more than 1.8 trillion pieces of plastic, which amounts to about 250 pieces of debris for every human on the planet.
Plastics that are made to last for 50, 100, 200 years are not things that belong in our ocean.
The Kauai covered more than 4,600 nautical miles between San Francisco and Honolulu. After a 45-day trip, the Ocean Voyages Institute crew pulled 96 tons of waste like this out of the Pacific Ocean.
One thing that we encountered out there was just a great amount of consumer plastics. All those types of things, they end up thousands of miles out in the Pacific.
Mary Crowley is the founder of Ocean Voyages Institute. She says every piece of trash will be repurposed, recycled, or upcycled into building blocks, insulation, furniture, and even energy.
We've worked with H-Power in Hawaii, where they use it to power homes. We've turned it into fuel.
The Kwai and ships from other organizations are working as fast as they can to keep the floating dump from growing larger.
This vessel and others like it could be out there for decades doing this job and keep coming back with cargo holds full of plastic for years to come.
That is, unless humans change their habits and consumption of single-use plastics. Max Darrow, CBS News.
And the Kwai collects trash mostly under sail power. The crew says it makes minimal use of its motor to reduce its carbon footprint. No nation has taken responsibility for provided funding to clean up the garbage patch, partly because it's located far from any shoreline. All right, well, more people are traveling, but the planes may be too crowded. So what happens next? That story is coming up on Mid-Morning. Welcome back. Airfares have gone sky high in recent months, and airlines have been shrinking the size of their seats for years. Now the FAA is asking for public feedback on the size and safety of airline seats. 4 years ago, Congress ordered the FAA to set new standards to ensure passengers can evacuate any airliner in 90 seconds or less. Chris Van Cleve has been following this story.
To study the safe size of airline seats, the FAA used this simulated cabin. In 2019, they showed us it can be filled with smoke and plunged into darkness. But that's not how the agency did its testing.
We're going to try to minimize the variables to the ones that are important for this particular test.
Leave everything, come this way!
The volunteer passengers who participated in simulated evacuations did have varying seat sizes, but did not have to deal with real-life obstacles like bags, smoke, comfort animals, or the dark. And they were in groups of 60. That's fewer people than are on many regional jets. The FAA found seat size and spacing did not adversely affect the success of emergency evacuations. But because all participants were able-bodied adults under 60, then FAA Administrator Steve Dixon acknowledged the results are useful but not necessarily definitive.
This was not representative of the flying public.
Congressman Steve Cohen authored the legislation requiring the seat size study.
The American public is becoming more and more obese, and the seats are getting smaller and smaller.
Do you worry that you wouldn't be able to get out quickly if you needed to?
And indeed, I do.
Airline seat width is down as much as 4 inches over the last 30 years to as little as 16 inches wide. And seat pitch has shrunk from about 35 inches to 31, and in some cases as little as 28 inches, allowing airlines to add more seats they can then sell. The group Flyers Rights estimates only about 25% of passengers, 1 in 4, actually fit in those seats. And more than half of flyers in a recent survey were dissatisfied with the legroom in economy.
What do you think of the size of airline seats right now?
I think they're tiny. I'm 5'9", and I typically fly with my knees to my chest for several hours long. It's challenging.
On average, I think that the seats are too small.
That would be a great improvement to have the seats much larger for everybody.
The FAA says it's focused on identifying the minimum seat spacing necessary to safely evacuate an airliner in 90 seconds. Its review of 10 years of incidents found the overall level of evacuation safety was very high. Human behavior, of course, is a critical factor if a plane must be evacuated in 90 seconds or less. When American Airlines Flight 383 had an engine fire on takeoff in 2016, it took nearly 2.5 minutes to get everyone off, in part because passengers grabbed their luggage.
FAA research has found that seats closer than 28 inches apart could present a real challenge to getting out of a plane in a hurry. As they draft new regulations setting this minimum seat size, they have a public comment period open for 90 days, but the agency only wants to hear about safety. They are not interested in comments about comfort. Chris Van Cleve, CBS News, Washington.
As travelers return to the skies in droves following a pandemic pause, airlines and airports across the world are grappling to meet demand. But are recession fears and soaring inflation impacting that travel boom as consumers weigh airfare, hotel, and gas prices? Jen Sullivan looks at why the travel industry appears to be thriving amid a possible economic downturn.
As the peak summer travel season winds down, travel experts say Americans are still spending money on their vacations despite historic inflation and recession fears.
While consumers are starting to pull back on some discretionary spending, some things they don't have to spend money on, it's not holding true for travel.
Several travel industry leaders say demand is still high. Scott Kays, founder of the flight aggregator website Scott's Cheap Flights, points to several factors, including a rise in credit card travel spending.
American Express noted that travel spending was up nearly 150% in the previous quarter.
That's despite fears of an economic downturn on the horizon. Experts blame that on so-called revenge travel, the huge travel boom following years of lost vacations during a pandemic slump. Meanwhile, Airbnb says reservations are soaring. On Tuesday, the company announced a 24% increase in bookings in the 3 months that ended in June, compared to the same time period in 2019. And when it comes to hitting the road, gas prices are declining. On Wednesday, the U.S. national average price of a gallon of regular gas was $4.16, according to AAA. Compared to a month ago, that was $4.81. And experts say cheaper prices are ahead.
While motorists may be incentivized by prices that have been falling, more decreases lie ahead.
On Wednesday, OPEC, the world's oil exporting countries and its allies, agreed to a tiny increase in production next month, amid fears that a global recession will hurt demand. For today's Consumer Watch, I'm Jen Sullivan.
And OPEC says it will produce an additional 100,000 barrels of oil a day in September. All right, when we come back, fraudsters tried to blackmail restaurants with bad reviews. That story is next. Welcome back, everyone. A new online scam is targeting restaurants across the country. It has the potential really to hurt their bottom line and scare away diners. The scammers are leaving fake one-star reviews, then demanding payment to remove them. Federal agencies are looking into this. It's one more problem for restaurants who are still recovering from the pandemic and facing rising prices. Janet Shamlian shows us what one top restaurant went through in Texas.
Scams are everywhere, on your phones, in your emails, and one scam could actually be influencing where you choose to eat. The target, restaurants that rely on customer reviews, and that's almost all of them. The swindle, demand a ransom, forcing restaurants to pay up or face a barrage of bad reviews.
Thank you for calling Blue Door. How may I help you?
Houston restaurant Blue Door is often mentioned as one of the city's best. But you wouldn't know it by some of the one-star reviews posted recently on Google.
Hey Jeff, where are these from?
Co-owner and chef Aaron Bluedorn says they all appeared at the same time.
When you first saw those negative reviews, what did you think?
I was heartbroken that someone was, taking something that we've worked so hard for, which were, plenty of 4-star, 5-star reviews and a good rating on Google, and they knocked us down.
Bluedorn and co-owner Sharif Mooch
most of them are.
say before this, they rarely received negative feedback.
How concerned were you?
Very concerned. A reputation for a restaurant is everything.
They learned the reviews were part of a scam after the restaurant says it received an untraceable email asking for a $75 Google Play gift card to have them taken down.
Did you ever consider paying the, quote, ransom or the gift card?
I didn't consider ever paying that ransom because to me that meant that they would have, won and been able to, I also didn't know where it would end.
The note said in part, negative feedback about your establishment has been left by us and will appear in the future, one review a day.
Restaurants across the country are reporting similar extortion threats. First, a barrage of bad reviews, then a request for money in the form of a gift card to stop them.
Anyone that thinks that they can put these bad reviews on and see if they can do a little shakedown of restaurants need to realize that they're committing a crime.
Michelle Korsmo of the National Restaurant Association says federal agents are now investigating the cyber criminals. She encourages more awareness among diners.
You know, consumers should really read reviews with a critical eye to see if they make sense with what others have said about the restaurant. Don't let a swindler scam you out of a great restaurant experience.
Blue Dorn says it reached out to Google, which initially said the one-star reviews didn't violate policy because there were no comments included. The restaurant then posted the blackmail attempt on its social media to explain what happened, and was overwhelmed when more than 100 customers submitted their own Google reviews.
Owning a small business, I decided to go write a review because reviews are so very important to getting everyday customers new to come in.
A Google spokesperson tells CBS News the company's teams are working around the clock to thwart these attacks, remove fraudulent reviews, and put protections on business profiles that may have been affected. And later, Google did, in fact, remove the reviews, both the bad ones and the good ones.
It seems the way Google fixed it was they looked at the range of which this incident had occurred and just took out all the reviews. So the one-star reviews, along with all the hundreds of good reviews that we've accumulated over a period of time.
Blue Dorn says it never lost customers, but it happened at a challenging time.
Not only are we dealing with inflation and less guest demand, but we're also dealing with it on our side with inflation, and we can't really raise our prices because we want to stay competitive. So every guest counts right now.
Battling bogus ratings as a restaurant defends its reputation. Janet Shamlian, CBS News.
When we come back, building a sense of place, the new architect for the Metropolitan Museum, next on Mid-Morning. Welcome back. New York City's world-famous Metropolitan Museum of Art is getting a major facelift. A rising star of the architecture world is leading the $500 million project. The 43-year-old Mexican architect over the competition to redesign the Met's new modern art wing. CBS News correspondent Enrique Avecido met her at the museum to talk about her work and what it means to be the first woman and the first Latina to design a wing of this institution.
I was coming very often here, and I remember that this was completely different.
Frida Escobedo's not looking to compete for real estate in one of the world's most famous skylines. She's more interested in building a sense of belonging.
What do you see?
Well, I see a city that is composed of many different cities and many different communities and many different cultures, and that's why it's so fascinating about New York.
The foundation Escobedo hopes to build at the Met's latest wing isn't so much about the bricks as the mortar that binds people together.
There's like these poetic element about architecture that we all are fascinated with. But to me, it's also about the personal journey, how it makes it feel connected to a larger thing, whether it's a community or a city.
Escobedo, who started her own architecture firm in 2006 in Mexico City, has spent much of the last decade and beyond building and renovating pavilions, museums, and hotels all around the world. Her designs are inventive, provocative, and like New York City, constantly evolving.
Is there a way to define your style?
I don't like to think about style so much as a set of preoccupations that we have, but I feel like defining it as a style can be a little bit dangerous because then you start repeating what you do and you stop experimenting and you stop learning.
The Met has a long and storied history with builders and architects, most of them white men. Hiring a young Mexico City-based architect like Escobedo to be the first woman and the first Latina ever to design a Met wing is seen as a long overdue effort to be more inclusive.
Sometimes I get like these mixed feelings about it because I don't want to be perceived, like just like a token. No one wants to do that. But at the same time, I feel very honored and lucky to have the opportunity because I know this is a big privilege. I'm just thankful for all the women that have opened the path for me to be here.
Escobedo is no stranger to New York City. For one of her most recent projects, this store in Brooklyn, she brought bricks in from Mexico to match the color of Park Slope's classic homes, a symbol of her calling card, using space to connect cultures. The Met project will be her biggest undertaking yet. It will create 80,000 square feet of galleries and public space for contemporary works that include drawings, photographs, sculptures, and digital art pieces.
Designing a public building, you don't have a specific client even if you do, because the final user is someone who might come to the museum to enjoy an afternoon and then leave.
It might be a little girl from Mexico.
Exactly.
Who's in New York for the first time.
For the first time, exactly. And when people embrace that as a space of their own, then it's when the magic happens for me.
Enrique Acevedo, CBS News, New York.
And we'll be right back to wrap things up. Stay with us. Be sure you stay connected with us. We'd love to hear from you. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can always drop us an email. We'll see you back next time.